Hi, this is Danny Marino Gruff, and I used to teach it at Milwaukee Public Schools. Here are quick ways to teach visual culture. There is an NAEA publication that is excellent, that you can download it, but I think the big thing here is that children will spend a third of their waking hours in front of a TV screen and are saturated with images, and that's the idea behind actually teaching visual culture. It's the study of the aspects of culture that rely on visual images. And I used to teach advanced placement art history. I also taught fibers and fabrics, and this worked in that too, just to add little assignments. Art is a part of students' everyday life, so that it is important that they understand it. We are working on the habits of observing, envisioning, innovating, reflecting, interpreting, and seeing how art connects to our lives. So these are things that can be included in visual culture, and I'll try to touch on each one of them, maybe just a little bit. I found this series to be great by Nigel Spivey. In fact, every kid for 17 years thought that Nigel Spivey was my boyfriend, and that's how they get to remember him. And I would always be like, look at him, he's right next to that artwork. And, he was a superstar. And I never showed the whole thing. I showed little snippets, one at a time, maybe 2 snippets a day, not to overload kids. And so these are just going to be little exercises, so you can change them, do whatever you want. But I tended to try to start class or start a new project with the kids kind of seeing what they knew first. So you talk less, they do more. So I would have preloaded papers that had different emotions on the back, and I would randomly pass them out and say, you have 5 minutes, turn your paper over, use colors, shapes, and lines to illustrate this without using picture symbols or words. And of course, they would be very simple. It worked the best. So you tell the kids to stop, stand up, everybody show your pictures, or you have them go in small groups, whatever. But the kids that had similar words, inevitably, all the time, if you use words that are different from each other, like anger, peace, love, those turned out the same. The easiest one for me to illustrate here is anger, where you see the kids naturally. Now, I've not said a word here to the kids, they just work. So you see that they use diagonal lines, they use the colors in common are black and orange. So they've done this all without me talking. And then you can see how that can translate into an artwork. Abby Lucente, who does work for MPS now, did an assignment that I saw, and hers was rough seas, and you can see the correlation in how the kids are drawing the rough seas with the colors and the diagonal lines. So it's applicable a lot of ways. And then its probable opposite, she also did tranquil seas, which are more pastel-y colors, more of a horizontal nature. And then our assignments later were always abstract expressionistic self-portraits, where each person, and this was high school, had to write about their lives and then illustrate that in a self-portrait that was abstract. The visual culture part is where you are having kids look at covers of movies or CDs or games to see the analogy. Why are they showing tranquil seas here? What is the idea of showing blues and horizontals? The kids probably can find dramatic ones with video games and movies, and then they can see how these artists in the illustrations use diagonal lines, black and yellows and oranges, and they can easily find an image that, and here they're just looking at that image and presenting that. So that was number one. This should probably be number two. But advertising is the easiest way to show visual culture. But what do I do with that? We all have our pop art assignments, and that's important. Because pop art, the idea here is that this is the artwork and we see it every day, and an artist made that. And what does that advertising do to you? So these lesson plans, I know that kids do that in elementary, middle school, high school, but that is what's important, because it will take their life to read the images in advertising and sales and to keep looking over that. So, if you think you're repeating something, you're really not, because you need to scaffold and look for different things. In high school, in art history, I liked this saying: Andy showed us the horror of our time as resolutely as Goya in his time. And what is that horror? Is it the repetition? Is it the carbon copies? Is it copying others? Is it, this off the assembly line image? And is it the image of an image? Well, there's a lot to discuss. You can have students merely take photos of something they have, something in the store. That's the visual culture part. This is a little bitty assignment to see where can you find an image of somebody advertising that you're wearing their advertising. Look in your closet, come back with a picture. I'm sure they have one. And looking at having kids look at commercials is another way to use visual culture. And it can get easy, and it's using fine art as a way to promote desire for things associated with wealth, power, and just having kids looking at commercials that they're seeing in a different way. And there we can see ones that I found quite easily. Kids can look, I wouldn't do it in elementary, but how are they creating desire with these images of art using Klimt and using Michelangelo? Kids can examine magazine covers, and there's a lot of ways to examine that. But then they're designing their own. They're just merely looking at the cover. They're looking at how the images are manipulated. You can do a million things. You can make ads and posters. This is Jeanette Arellano here doing an image on, I think it was the butterfly image about migrants. Here's one from Hamilton, Cindy Freezy, of kids looking at images that represent their culture. Number two is architecture. Architecture is around us, and how does that architecture show? How does it show politics? How does it show individuality? How does it show tradition? What can we see from architecture? So usually the assignment I had was to do one of the two, like to do something classical or to do something modern or postmodern, and having the kids quickly make things. I mean, you can always go into here essays. What does less is more mean? What is less is boring? But there's many different ways you can look at architecture. Those were just a couple of the assignments. Costume design. If you're going to look at that, I think you can easily have kids examine the costumes in their favorite shows, their favorite movies, and get a picture of it. And that can supplement what they're looking at, because somebody designed the clothes or made them from the past. What did they do? I did see a lecture from, I can't remember her name. She did the Black Panther design, and those are good to look at. Here was a images at a museum in Detroit. This was Star Wars costumes, and they had a nice spiel about the colors and the textures and what fabrics they used. what jewelry was used along with it. Um, I had the idea of I took these off of TV, watching a show and looking at the costumes that were designed there and having kids, notice, somebody designed those. Somebody wrote about it and then somebody designed it. Looking at the colors and the shapes of that. It could be a million different assignments. In Fibers, we always had the kids design clothing lines and how did their image or their logo match the design. But all of that, you would want them to look at clothing in the world. The representation of the human figure is something that in Greek sculpture, it changed over time. And there's so many ways to do this. I'm just suggesting a couple ideas. But what I always did was had the kids move from classicism to romanticism, realism, and seeing how that always changed throughout the world. There's probably a little much for a regular class. But I looked at them as opposing forces and having kids look at the intellectual versus the emotional. Now, how do you get them to do something first? Here, you had two images, Renaissance and Baroque, and had the kids look at the colors, look at the diagonals, look at the shapes, and merely in a group put lines over it or trace it on a paper and to see what devices those artists used. Playing dress up and getting into those shapes and just taking a picture. Playing dress up at home. Taking that image and putting your face in it is another one. Or the kids, you have 10 minutes to get into one of the poses of one of these images. And we always did the tableau vivant or the living picture. And I think it was Van Eyck. But that's how we started, was to do this and then start looking at the images and what people used to dress up as their favorite art. Another image, what is beauty? This could be used in a multiple classes. Kids get together, since they're using magazine or newspaper images, they're not drawing, but they're trying to look at the world and seeing what other people think is beauty or what they think is beauty. Either way, you could do it. And you can look at other collages or montages. And here's two from classes that worked rather quickly. And then you have a discussion about what is beauty? What was the Greek ideal? How did that come about? Again, this is much for class, but man is the measure of beauty. And I would always have the kids measure, starting with their finger, the golden rectangle, the golden triangle. You can see the Vitruvian man there in the image, but relating that to mathematics and the human body and where ideals of beauty came from. And what is this classical look? They can easily find an image of some star that has that classical look even now. What is that all about? Can you measure on the face? Can you outline? Can you compare that to the Greeks? Can I find that classical look in the store? Here is one. Yes, I just went in a store and in a couple minutes in Walgreens found this, found these. And they all have that image of beauty. You can tell the kids to look up magazine covers by decade. Has that image of beauty changed in our culture? I just looked up, what is that, Vogue? And easily you can see that we keep changing different images. Here's some more from 1950. How does that differ from today? Can compare decades rather easily. And then there's the discussion of what is beauty over the years. I always said, man, I belong in a different decade, the Baroque. I'd be really sought after then. And then why do we exaggerate? Nigel does a good part on that. The exaggeration in here is a historical image, Nefertiti, and a current image. The homework project is to find, and this was for art history, but it could be for anything, is to find a visual culture image from a magazine. Don't talk about it. Find that image and match it to an image from the past. And I have done this time and time again. And boy, kids keep coming up with new ones. I've just put a couple here, and then that's all they do is show it. They're beautiful, huh? Also, you can do it with an ancient and a modern. How do some ancient pieces compare with modern pieces? There's striking similarities. And the kids in art history had to do an essay, a comparative essay, trying to talk about one thing and then the same thing in the other work, but you can do it just with images alone. Another word that we use a lot is an icon. So how can you introduce that? I had a pre-activity with this too all the time. I would set up with my little granddaughter. Here's a picture of this little girl. She's going to save humanity. So you have 15 minutes to show me how this little girl is the new princess. So sometimes I stack the deck with things in the back. Like you can see there's silver. I had some gold things. I had doilies. But inevitably, they did what this group here did, is to put something around her head or to highlight her. It always happened. And then that's when you can talk about auras, halos, solar discs. Otherwise, those words, they're hard to talk about. But they've done it themselves so they can see, oh, yeah, this is a special image. A ring of fire, the Renaissance when they did a thin line as a halo. Nimbus, mandorlas. Then maybe you want to talk about how icons were burned during the iconoclasm. And I always, around this time, I'd pass out the 10 Commandments. And the kids would go, no, you can't talk about the 10 Commandments. And I go, no, it's just one of them. The second, thou shalt not worship graven images. And then you can talk about, why would people burn this stuff? I always had kids go together. There's a couple teachers in this picture, but we go together, say, take selfies with you five. But what do they do? Is the most important kid is in the center? Is it? Ask them how they did that and how they set themselves up. And then you can start looking at images where the center, the person in the center, the hieratic placement was the most important person was in the center, and there were other clues to indicate why they were important. I was outlined Middle Age art too, and that this was a good way to try to talk about things that kids thought they couldn't see, but they can see, to see how different eras match, how some are more naturalistic and some are more Byzantine in nature. And then you can talk about icons today. The photograph versus image of the photograph. And iconoclasts is always good to discuss. What is an iconoclast today? Everybody can give a sample or a picture. Places of worship, you can talk about where kids worship. What does it look like? What is it trying to portray in that image? Is it trying to be gilded? Is it trying to be plain? Is it, there's all kinds of colors, shapes, designs that can tell you things. The male gaze is something important to talk about And that probably would be older kids in art history, but decoding images that were um, supposed to look good to the male of the species. And kids can find images that represent women as sexual objects. Probably they can find one in something that they own at home and just take a picture of it. Just look at it. Just write a sentence about it. And then looking at ads that sometimes, what are they making a parody of? A little harder to find, but kids can find them. Toys and play, looking at toys and the images and how they portray people is important. Can be an assignment just to take a picture of an object, to talk about it, to create a toy, anything that you want. Looking at pure form in some objects. Looking at politics through the ages and comparing today's images and what politicians are portraying with some from the past. And even in the past, how different rulers were manipulated in their portraits. How the Hope poster helped win for Obama. Here's an assignment at Salt Division by Valentin Garcia. Does an excellent job in these assignments and discussing this issue. This is a college student. I'm not sure I would show that to everybody, but I wish I would have thought of this. Music videos. Watching the music video without the sound, do the visuals match the tone of the music? Does the color match? I mean, that's just a color assignment, but it can go on top of another assignment if you're designing things. And I looked at Apeshit the Carters. And they went to the Louvre, rented it, and they filmed there. And they said the backdrop, the images take on new meaning. Cindy Sherman's another artist that you should have kids look at that subvert the stereotypical female images. And photo stills. I actually can't remember what I did with this, but kids can look at photo stills and try to relate those. I'm not really sure. Billboards is another issue where you can look at a Milwaukee billboard with maybe a human in it and then relate that back. This is Persepolis. It was Assyrian, and what kind of propaganda was happening then, and how those artists, even way back then, knew the power of art and how they could show these different people of different cultures so they could try to build unity when they overtook another culture. And you can look at art in billboards today and see what they are trying to create. And again, it's just looking at things around you, having a kid take a picture, having a kid have an idea. And there is a artsy magazine I would suggest getting online. And that's it. These are just a lot of ideas. Visual culture is a thing, and then most of the time people don't really know what to do with it. So these are just ideas of what to do with it that you can use in your own way. Thank you. Bye.